Yes, I'm early.
Just a little bit, about 10 minutes early, but thank you for joining.
Sure, I'll sit quietly.
Thank you. We want to thank everybody for joining us, and we will get started in just a little bit. We're having a bit of technical difficulty getting our host in. So as soon as we get Britt on the line, we will get started. Oh, it looks like we got him. Right in the nick of time. Hey, how's it going? And you're on mute.
There. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great.
All right. Hey, how's it going?
Well, I didn't pre-register, which I never had before, but apparently I had to this time. But once I got that figured out, it was a 4-minute process, so no big deal.
All right, sounds good. Well, apparently what else has been no big deal has been winning for the Wolves, 6 in a row, 9 out of the last 10, 17-4 overall. This is, I guess we can say, considering we're in uncharted territory, very unexpected. So I know that all of our viewers are interested in what you have to say. But before we get to what you have to say today, I do want to let everyone know you have your own newsletter with MinnPost that will be coming to inboxes regularly. So go to MinnPost.com. Under the newsletter tab, sign up for newsletters, and it is the is it And One with Britt?
Yep.
All right. So please sign up for that newsletter to get everything Wolves. With that being said, Britt, take it away.
Okay, thanks. Harry's right. I mean, 16 wins in 18 games, 9 and 10, 6 in a row. You can pick your fabulous stat, but the Timberwolves have never played this well in their history. And so this is their third meeting with the Pels. They beat them twice. They thrashed them their first meeting. They came from behind and pulled out probably their most unlikely victory of the season on the 18th, their second meeting. This meeting is going to be tougher. The Pels are 10-4 when they have Zion, Herb Jones, Valanciunas, and I think it is Ingram in the lineup, 10-4. They have not had Zion the other two times. They are favored by 3 points at home tonight over the Wolves. I think it's going to be a tough game. In their last 10 games, they have not shot well at all from 3-point territory, but are 7th in the NBA in field goal percentage and 4th in the NBA in getting to the free throw line. And then I guess the last little stat I want to put out before I start taking questions is that I think one of the key players to watch tonight is Cat. In the previous 2 games against the Pelicans, he's 19 for 23 from the field, 6 for 7 from 3-point territory, 8 for 10 from the line, 9 assists, 3 turnovers, just fabulous 2 games. The big asterisk there is 11 personal fouls. He fouled out of one game and had 5 fouls in another. And now he's up against Zion, or will be at least part of the team that will be guarding Zion. So all that is going to be kind of interesting. With that said, I'll start taking your questions. I think the way we usually do it is, I guess, just from the basis of who I see. How do we work this, Harry?
We have a raise hand feature, and if you
that's right.
features like Nick has just hit, then we can start taking questions from there.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Nick. Let's go with you.
Thanks. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
All right. A little higher level, Britt. A lot of the national pundits, and I think you had dinner with a scout, keep bringing up the infamous Gobert getting beat by the small 5-out lineups. We've seen a couple instances where Gobert has actually defended pretty well this year with the Wolves. Do you feel like we have seen enough evidence, not to say that this will definitely be a different story in the playoffs, but at least to say that this is a different team than those Jazz teams, specifically in guarding the small ball 5-out lineups?
Yes,
And if not, how many minutes? Okay, you think yes.
I do. I think it's a difference. It was a kind of an interesting discussion for those who don't know. I was on a pod with Dane Moore, and we were talking about a scout from Indiana who was there before the last game. I think it was against San Antonio, and he was making the opinion that the Wolves would have the same fate befall them in the postseason that befell the Utah Jazz, and that Rudy can't get out and guard in space, and therefore they would attack that, especially if Cat was also in the lineup. And I said it wasn't an apples to apples comparison. I asked him who the second best defender on the team was, and he said Mike Conley. Well, Mike Conley is like the fourth best defender on this team. You have guys like Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and you've got a scheme that Rudy trusts that enables him to get out in space and guard in space. Do I think that that can be beaten? Do I think that that is a strength of the Wolves, that they can get out and guard 5-out offenses? No, I do not. That's the way that Sacramento beat them. In some ways, it was the way that Atlanta beat them. But I think the evidence is pretty clear that it will take a phenomenal game or a very good game. Sacramento was on the money in that game, and Atlanta had a superb second half. And the team is aware of it. They've been working on adjustments on zones and switches, as well as their the way they are beginning to rotate and drop back, come and go. Gobert has covered a lot more room. He has a lot better teammates than he had in Utah. He is moving better than ever before. He said it. Chris Finch said it. The Wolves have the best defense in the NBA thus far. So easy answer is, I think they're better prepared for it than Utah was better prepared for it back 4 or 5 years ago, because they have better defenders, because Rudy is more flexible in the schemes he's going to be able to handle, and because it takes a really, really good offense in that type of realm to defeat them that way. It's notable that the one that really put it on the map was Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks. And in the 2 or 3 games against Luka and Dallas last season, they haven't played them this season, but even last season when they weren't firing on all cylinders, Rudy played very, very well, getting up in coverage and getting outside. And of course, we remember Jaden McDaniels and Ant shutting down Luka and Kyrie in the waning seconds of that game. So I'm not worried about it. Do I say it is a potential vulnerability? Yes, just like any team that the Wolves will play will have potential vulnerabilities. Louis. Question?
Yep. Hey, Britt, thanks for doing this. Love your work. Appreciate you taking the time. Kind of in a similar lane, just given how Gobert has kind of become, he's had this renaissance, he's become the identity of this team in a lot of ways. And, you know, in a different way, but similarly, Conley has contributed so much and is the engine. How do they manage their minutes? Because they're old, and, you know, they have banked quite a few wins right now, but sustaining this pace, and really, especially Conley's activity on the defensive end going forward into the playoffs, like it just strikes me that at some point they're going to need to start doing some soft load management or something, just so that he's fresh. Because you got to start thinking about the postseason at this point. You know, I mean, obviously we're early, but yeah.
I think that's been a plan throughout the season. One of the 4 questions I had going into the season in terms of what would determine success or failure was the depth behind Conley, or how they would use Conley. Conley is the first starter that goes to the bench in the first quarter. He usually plays 5 to 6 minutes and then gets subbed out. Admittedly, he has been used frequently. There was one point in time where Chris Finch played him the last 15 minutes of a game. Can't remember which one it was. It was a close victory they needed to pull out. That can't happen very often. Conley does say that he's fine. He feels great. He wants to play. But I think the point being that you do want to keep him. He's, 36, 37 years old and doesn't have that kind of mileage. You don't want to burn him out. I do think that Jordan McLaughlin being out and Jaden McDaniels being out hurts the ability to rest Conley more than we do right now. But I don't regard that again as something that, but if somebody gets hurt, and if Mike Conley gets hurt, probably the hardest player to replace on the roster right now. On the other hand, Chris Finch and the Wolves are a team that believes in, keeping players in rotation. If they're suited up, they're expected to take their regular rotation. I think ideally they'd like to have Conley be between 20, 28 and say 31, 32 minutes. He's right around there now, maybe a little on the high side. But I think especially once McLaughlin gets back, if Shake Milton ever comes around, he was slotted to be the backup point guard this year. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been a very good playmaker as well as a defender, as being somebody who can spell both Jaden McDaniels and Conley. I think their depth in the backcourt has not been as strong because of Shake's failures this year, but I do think there are worse problems to have. It's a concern. As for Gobert, I don't worry about that. I think that he's getting about the same amount of minutes, maybe slightly less than he's used to. He's always had this. And I think, he's a little long in the tooth, but 30, 31 years old for a big man is not really enough of a cause for concern. Justin.
Good evening. First off, for those of us who have left Twitter and discussed, I hope you'll start cross-posting to Threads at some point, or at least consider doing that as well, so we can maybe recreate some of that over there. My question is about Cat, and I think we all know one of the things that's so frustrating for a lot of fans, including me, is the fouls and the fact that so many of them are based on bad technique that never seems to get better. The hooking people, the kicking his foot out or moving screens, that sort of thing. And I guess I'm wondering if you can give us some insight as to what the internal discussions have been about with him over the years about that. Is it just because he's too proud to admit that there are problems? What have the coaches tried with him? It does seem like it's gotten a little better this year, but I guess any insight there would be helpful.
I would push back and say that it's gotten a lot better. I think that he does have a tendency to commit fouls. I think that the type of fouls he's committing now are a little bit better. When he's not doing well, it's when he has decided that he needs to drive the ball into a crowd of players. That can occasionally still happen. It did happen a couple of games ago. But I don't see him baiting the refs. He doesn't get in pissing matches with the referees, which is the sports analogy of, you don't fight with people who buy their ink by the barrel back in the old days when print mattered. But I think that you don't want to get on the wrong side of the refs. I think Cat has done a much better job of that this year. I think Cat in general has done a lot better job this year. And I would say that glass is probably 3/5 full rather than 2/5 empty. Given that he's a 50, 40, 90 guy right now. He's a phenomenal shooter. He has figured out a way to play power forward next to Rudy Gobert. Over the last 10 games, the Gobert-Cat partnership, the Wolves are giving up less than 100 points per 100 possessions. When he's on the court, that's on defense. That's Cat's general weakness. And I just think that he's finding, there was a game where he had 5 feeds to Gobert, cutting in the lane. Gobert was actually catching the passes in rhythm and slamming them home. It was the game where he had like 6 dunks in the first half. Cat fed him 4 times for dimes. There's a lot more to like about Cat than there is to dislike about Cat. I mean, I understand where, Wolves people have seen this franchise for a long time, and there's got to be something to complain about. But I really think that right now, Cat is not necessarily in complainable territory.
Right. And I should clarify. I agree. I really like him. I think for the most part, it's been great. I was just specifically wondering about the technique stuff. So I appreciate that response.
Okay, sure, no problem. Steve's iPhone. Steve.
Hey there, Britt. So I hear that McDaniels is a game time decision tonight, which is a happy thing for those of us waiting for him to come back in. How do we best incorporate him back into the lineup?
Well, the way Finch usually works it, he'll probably be on a minutes restriction, but he'll probably be in his regular role. I think that if that's true, then he would probably be on Ingram. Ingram is a really good mid-range shooter. He had an inefficient game the first time they played, a very good game the second time they played. My deal with Jade McDaniels this year is fouling. He's gotten worse at it, and that was a big concern his first few years in the league. And I think it remains to be seen what can happen there. I think he has obviously been a great defender. His offense has really been better than his defense this year, which is really odd, because he's still regarded as a defense first guy, and rightfully so. But too many fouls this year. New Orleans is a team that gets to the free throw line. The Wolves are a team that tend to foul when the game gets very physical. I would imagine there's some rust on his game if he does play. In fact, I think that it will be very interesting to see how he's able to stay with people without fouling. I think that Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been phenomenal in his replacing of Jade McDaniels, and the fact that the Wolves have lost a guy who is one of the top 10 or 15 on-ball defenders in the NBA, even with the fouls. Having Nah come in and replace McDaniels as well as he has, and also being a really good shooter and playing with confidence and sharing the ball with teammates. I just think that, again, it's part of this charm season thus far. You would not think that McDaniels, they've played 21 games, McDaniels has only played in 11 of them. So almost half the time he's been out. The fact that they have not missed him and are 17-4 is pretty remarkable. But I too am interested in seeing what happens tonight. I don't see the name, but I see a guy with a guitar as an icon. So you're...
Hey there. Sorry, my name's Dan. Yeah, I assume you were talking to my icon. So
Yeah.
I have sort of a half theory, half question. It with kind of on the cusp of little J-Mac making his way back in the rotation. It seems to me that in his entire tenure with the Wolves, Jordan McLaughlin has been sort of a plus minus darling, and he runs an offense in a way that is really in line with the Chris Finch ethos.
Right.
And except for like one really bad stretch last year that I think a lot of people attribute now maybe to him being not quite right coming back from his calf strain. And I just have always felt like he has a shorter rope than he deserves, kind of based on his perceived physical limitations, that in a way that it's not really translated to what happens on the court. And so I hear people talk about the Wolves, and even after he comes back, like we just have no depth at point guard, and where to go from there. But it feels like, and I understand there's some, he's not always been the greatest shooter, but it doesn't seem to impact kind of the outcome on the court. And it seems like our backup point guard, like a consistent rotation guy, is staring us in the face. And I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've, like a lot of people associated with the Wolves, I've yo-yoed back and forth on J-Mac. One of my colleagues, Jace Frederick of the Pioneer Press, is a huge J-Mac guy. And there are adherents out there in the fan base. Chris Finch has, been won over by J-Mac on a more than one occasion. And last year at one point swore that he would not sour on J-Mac the way he had in previous seasons, because J-Mac does have a habit of coming back and making you look foolish for not believing in him. I will repeat something that I've said before when I've been down on J-Mac, and that is there are two things about him that are problematical. One is he is small, and while he is very dogged, you just like you can't teach size, you can't compensate for a lack of size. Sometimes he does a great job in terms of fronting people when they try to post him up, in terms of getting in lanes, getting deflections. He's great on long rebounds, 50-50 balls, all that stuff. He works really hard to overcome his lack of height. And in general, I think the numbers have shown him to be a fairly good defensive player. However, there are times when he can be picked on and is picked on defense, especially if they have the right matchup on the other team, having a large guard or something. The one that's worse than that is that J-Mac has not proven to hit a three-point shot consistently enough to guarantee that he'll be guarded. And in the NBA, that's a death knell. And for Chris Finch, that is a death knell. That's why Josh Okogie is no longer on this team. That's why he wants people who can put the ball in the basket, 5 guys who can shoot on the court. J-Mac, even at his best, has been a mediocre three-point shooter. And last year he was terrible. He was terrible before the calf, worse after the calf injury. But in prior years hasn't been great either. Again, he does things that compensate for that. He is one of the quickest decision makers on the team. I would say he and Nas are probably the people who, once they get the ball, make a decision with the ball, for better or worse. For Nas, it's not always for the better, but for J-Mac, it almost always is. He is fantastic at ball movement. He is fantastic at setting a pace. Players love to play with him. He's plus 24 again this year. It was very, very small minutes, but again, a plus-minus darling. The Timberwolves do very well when he's on the court. But I will say that they went out and got Shake Milton because he's 6'5", 220, and they want to become a more physical team, and they thought there's a backup point guard that we can have when we want to get physical with people. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not that size, but he plays very physically. Jaden McDaniels plays very, very physically. They want to be a lot more physical this year, and they have been. Again, that's not J-Mac's game, but J-Mac is a pest. He can be better on defense. And I don't think anybody who's watched the Wolves this year can say, even with a 17-4 record, there haven't been a handful of games where J-Mac not being able to be in the lineup to settle down an offense and put pace in the lineup and get ball movement and movement off the ball, which are two things he does extremely well, would have been very helpful. So again, mixed bag. I expect him to come in after being out and kind of do the same thing he's always done, which is just blow everybody away for a week or two period, and then settle back in and generally be a solid point guard, but also have moments where you kind of wish there was somebody better. It's kind of a yo-yo, and I'm on that yo-yo.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Great stuff.
Sure. Eric.
Britt, first of all, I wanted to thank you for all the great content that you and Dane and the community have been providing. It's been just a joy to be able to experience this season through the light of other people who are, for once, being able to celebrate defense and being able to celebrate what's going on with the Timberwolves. And in that light, I wanted to ask you quickly about the trades that the front office has made. Now, having been through all the criticism of the Gobert trade, and looking at it, I was on one of one of these group meetings last year, and I was talking about late ones, and now we've got a lot of number 2s that are in line, but they're good number 2 draft picks that are coming up, and there's sort of a draft, the draftnik analysis saying that late ones are the worst draft picks you can have, and early 2s are the best because of the financial freedom. And I just want to know what your thought is, again, revisiting the the Gobert trade in light of that, and also in light of the joy that he's brought us in defense?
Yeah, I think, first of all, full disclosure, while I was initially happy with the Gobert trade and thought it was a good idea, the moment I saw Gobert and Cat on the court in the final preseason game last year, I began to doubt it. And then my doubts hardened through the course of what I thought was a very dispiriting season if the referendum was Gobert and Cat. And so I was thinking, I called the Wolves for 46 to 48 wins this year and a 5 seed, with the stipulation that that pairing would not work out well and that they'd work despite that pairing. So props to Tim Connolly for not listening to me and many others. And I am prepared to say that on defense especially, we have seen what Gobert can do with movement and a buy-in, both on a hybrid of what he used to do in Utah and what they want him to do here in Minnesota. I think he's happy. I think he's motivated, and he is justifying the trade. Would I do the trade even today? That would be hard because, you had Walker Kessler, you have 4 first-round draft picks. You could have done either kept any of Vando, Pat Bev, and Beasley, or sold them, traded them for more options. So I still think it was a dear price to pay, but it does not look like the terribly one-sided trade that I began to think it was at the end of last season, and still kind of held that opinion coming into this season. So that's kind of a mea culpa in terms of my take on the Gobert trade. As to the draft picks, Tim Connolly has been historically great in the draft. Leonard Miller, who they traded up to get, I think I can't remember if he was in the second round or whether they got him at the end of the first round, but it was a worthy pick. It was a good pick. I think Josh Minot, a second rounder, looks like a really good young player. Both of those guys are kind of in a mold of being able to play kind of a rangy, springy front court. Miller can be anywhere from 3 to 5, but I see him as a real small ball 5. Minot can be a 3 or a 4. I see him as a small ball 4. I can see down the road, if they pan out, and that's a long ways away, but a Miller, Minot with Ant and McDaniels and whatever point guard is on the team, being a really fascinating, switchable lineup of really cool athletes. You're right about the fact that early second rounders are preferable to first rounders, in that you can negotiate their contracts. You can give them a quote unquote Gupta special, which was given to Naz Reid early, given to Jalen Noel early. And what that means is, rather than just sign them for a year and maybe an expiring or a player option of the second year on a second rounder, if you believe in the second rounder, or in Naz's case, a free agent, an undrafted player, you sign them up for 3 or 4 years at peanuts, at what it will cost to get a late first rounder for half that period of time, and you develop them. And that, Noel provided some value under that contract. He certainly did not waste value, because it was not a lot of value to waste. It was not a expensive contract at all. Naz obviously developed to the point where he got a much bigger deal, $14 million a year for the next 3 years. Seems to have deserved it. And so I like the idea. Now, Connolly didn't draft Naz or Noel. He did draft Miller and Minot, and I'm beginning to think, most famously, he drafted Nikola Jokic in the second round, but nobody really had any idea that you don't draft multiple league MVPs in the second round. But I will say that both in the way he has made deals, the Rudy Gobert trade is the only move he's made since he's been a GM, with a possible signing 2 years, $10 million for Shake, where I could say there's any question. The D'Lo deal now is just one of the best deals in Timberwolves history, if not the best deal in Timberwolves history. getting Mike Conley, Nikhil Alexander Walker in a couple of seconds. So, yeah, I'm a big Tim Connolly guy. And in answer to your question about the draft, losing those first fours may be a little less painful given the fact that Connolly will be doing the drafting. Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Britt. And thanks to MinnPost for continuing to feature Britt like this. Stuff like this is super fun to attend, and love your coverage. In your mailbag and then on the show with Dane, you spoke to the sort of dynamic the Timberwolves have to face of, either sort of that tiered decision of, do you have to trade Cat or Nas? Do you keep Mike Conley or Slow-Mo, all that kind of stuff? And it feels like recently, Kyle's still been really valuable, but he's some of the vision stuff that folks have seen and some of his just his game and all those things has the last couple of weeks tweaked your perspective on all of it. And obviously we have the whole season to get a bigger sample size and all of that, but as your perspective on that sort of tiered decision shifted at all since that column mailbag came up?
Yes, I think probably, but I think it's fluid. It was fluid back then, which is why I can say yes now. And specifically, I will say that Conley's value has become more precious as Shake Milton as a backup point guard option has been less viable as J-Mac has been injured for a second straight season. And as Nikhil Alexander Walker, while being very capable, is not a natural ball handling point guard. You'll notice that when Nikhil is in the game, opponents pick him up in the backcourt and disrupt him. He is not regarded as somebody who's automatically going to be able to take care of the ball. Also, I think that the swing 3-4 positions, the small forward and power forward positions, have a lot more depth on this Wolves roster than the point guard position. And those are the two positions that Slow-Mo plays. I wrote in my column last week that it's of concern. Slow-Mo, at the time I wrote, had not hit a three-pointer in a month. It had been from November 8th to December 8th. And then he went and played, I guess, San Antonio. Oh, no, it was Memphis. And, shot like 4 in a row because it was so obvious that teams were leaving him wide open, and barely grazed the rim on one of them and didn't hit the rim on 3 others. Just a horrible performance. And once they got into garbage time, Finch left him on the court to literally try to get back into a rhythm. He eventually did hit a three-pointer. So at least he got that albatross of when was the last time, so on and so forth. But the bottom line is his three-point shooting has been terrible. He's had bad seasons before. He's had 2 or 3 prior seasons below 30% on three. Last year was a career high 41%. His viability is somewhere in the middle. He needs to be in the 30s and hopefully in the mid 30s. But his defense this year is the Timberwolves, among all 10 rotation players, 9 rotation players, when Kyle Anderson is on the court, they have the lowest points allowed per 100 possessions than with any other player on the court. It's kind of fascinating that of all the pairs of players in the NBA, I just found this was interesting. Let me see if I can find it exactly here for a second. Of all pairs that have played together over 200 minutes together, the best defensive rating for a 2-player pair is Ant and Slow-Mo, 94.6 points allowed in 266 minutes. So he's just been great, and he's been playing the 3, which is not usually his best position, but he's adapted well, as has Nas. The Nas, Cat, Slow-Mo front court, I referenced it about 3 columns ago. It started off incredibly well. It has come on a little bit more difficult times recently, but it still is better than anybody would have given it credit for. And I guess all I can say is, rather than turning this into a book, is that Slow-Mo seems like the guy, if they need to get rid of somebody, that the Wolves will get rid of. Whoever gets him is going to get a really, really good player, and he's going to be gotten at a value in terms of salary. He's a $20 to $25 million player who will probably get somewhere in the range of $10 to $15 million. And he will be incredibly valuable. And the reason the Wolves would let go of him is because Mike Conley is precious. Tim Connelly loves Mike Conley, as stated publicly. I asked him, was the first question of media day. I happened to be the first questioner. And I said, you plan on trying to keep Mike Conley? He says, I want Mike Conley here for the rest of his career. I don't know if that's going to be possible. Chris Paul got, over $15, $20 million, upwards of $30 million long-term contract when he was in his mid-30s. If Mike Conley wants to hold up this team and break the bank, it will be extremely difficult, painful decision for management. But I don't see any other way than paying it for at least 2 or 3 years, if that's what happens, because there's really not enough behind him. And I think that he's a blessing for Anthony Edwards in the locker room. He's really helping Ant on and off the court. He is one of the most professional. He and Taj Gibson are the 2 most impressive players I have ever covered in the locker room on a day-to-day basis. And I just think that you've got to go with Conley. But I'll tell you, if Nas was in that mix, if you said you have to go with either Conley, Nas, or Slow-Mo, who do you kick out? It would be Nas for me. That's not what the fan base would go with. And it may be a foolish, short-sighted decision on my part, given Nas's youth and steady upward learning curve. But I guess what I'm saying is, yes, I would take Conley over Slow-Mo, but Slow-Mo, wherever he lands, will be impactful. If that's the Kyle that had the question before, I'm going to go with Mark Snyder first. Mark. Mark, you there? Oh, maybe not. Okay, let's go with Kyle then.
Aha, gotcha, Britt. No, I have kind of a 2-parter here. One, I'm hoping to get a little bit of comments in the chat there. By a little bit of luck, my wife and I are going to be in Miami for this game against the Heat this upcoming Monday. And so I was hoping for a little bit of heckling inspiration for Jimmy Butler beyond what I have already brainstormed, which is yelling out General Soreness and giving him a salute. But beyond that, what I did want to ask you about is I am still at an age where the 03-04 season, I was early in high school. So I remember it fondly, but probably more emotionally than intellectually. And you've covered the team for so long. I look at this team on Basketball Reference and I look at the stats and I just look at the actual players that we have and the way that I feel like we have such upside in every single part of our starting lineup. And I guess I'm curious to hear from you, having covered the team as long as you have. I feel like the team that we have now, hopefully it's not just the recency bias, but I can't help but feel like we have the high-end ceiling and talent to rival or even surpass that 03-04 team. Am I drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, do you think? Or, the NBA, I think the talent pool in general has improved also since that time. So there's that to factor in. But I feel like the high-end ceiling of this team may even rival that team. And I would be curious to hear what your thoughts are about that, given you the difference in experience.
Sure. Well, in terms of raw numbers, which is one way to look at it, the 03-04 team never went 17-4. They never won 16 out of 18 games. This is the most glorified Timberwolves run in their 35-year history. But if we are going to look at numbers, then we also have to say that 2 playoff series victories are the only 2 playoff series victories in Timberwolves history, and that there have been 21 out of 82 games played, which is almost exactly a quarter of the season. So you're judging a season based on the first quarter of play. If you want to extrapolate that to a game, there are 3 quarters left to play in this season. The potential is certainly there for to be the best Wolves season ever. What I will remind people of, because again, it's Kevin Garnett, obviously the best player in Timberwolves franchise history. So that nobody on this current team can match that. They had Latrell Sprewell and Sam Cassell, 2 veteran players who knew how to win. They had Irvin Johnson, who was an undersung center who played really good defense. Trenton Hassel, who this was a year before they outlawed hand checking, was a fantastic defender who defended with his hands on people's backs incredibly well. Off the bench, Fred Hoiberg, who was phenomenal as a 6-man candidate, great shooter, made well over 40% of his threes that year. And then Wally Zerbiak came back late because of an injury, but he was in the mix. So it was a very, very good team. This team, Conley is having a great season, a season in line with the years he put in Memphis that got them not only to 50 wins, but in deep into playoff series. Second round, at least, sometimes conference semis, sometimes conference finals. Slow-mo, despite his shooting, having a very good year. Ant has taken the leap. We'll see. I don't know what his status is tonight. Somebody may know by now, but having a phenomenal year. And then you've had the role players step up. Troy Brown Jr. in the last 4 or 5 games has been, Hoiberg-like or Trenton Hassel-like. You have a guy, Cat has played. I think this is in line with the best Cat has played in his career. I would say the high wall year with Pat Bev and Vando, Finch's first full year here 2 years ago, I guess that was probably his best season before this. And the one before that, when he and Jimmy went to the playoffs, was a very good year. But he's having, at the very worst, one of his top 3 seasons out of 9 years in the league. They're extremely well coached. They believe in each other. There's not a lot of dissension on this team, as there wasn't in the past. They don't have such an obvious leader as KG was, not only the most talented player, but clearly the leader. Ant's getting there. Ant is on the trajectory of what KG was on in the late 90s rather than 03, 04. But I have to say, defense wins championships. And the Timberwolves have the best defense. I can say this with a clear conscience. Through the first quarter of this season, they are playing defense better than any Timberwolves team has ever played defense. And that was a great, the 03-04 team is the obvious rival to that, having Irvin Johnson, Trenton Hassel, Kevin Garnett, Latrell Sprewell. That's 4 guys who really know how to defend. Well, Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they all really know how to defend too. And the guys that you don't regard as being really good defenders, like the Naz Reeds and the Karl Anthony Townses, are defending extremely well in this system. And the Timberwolves had the top NBA defense after the first 10 games and they had the top NBA defense after the first 21 games. So it isn't like they had a boomlet and they're coasting on this. They've been relatively consistent, and you just have to. It's one of the things, if you watch enough basketball, you find out, I mean, if you play really good defense, you can take it to the bank. It's a make or miss league. But what that means is those are the variables. What isn't a variable is when you shut people down. So I'm optimistic. I'm thinking that this team could go further than the Western Conference Finals, but I can see them getting to the Western Conference Finals, which is further than any Wolves team besides that 03-04 team has gotten. Mark, you're back. Can I get you this time? There may be a
yes, sorry. I had
Okay,
a
sure, no
mishap
problem.
with my mute button anyway. I guess my question, because we haven't really talked about him a whole lot other than just little bits here in the Naz Reid. Naz Reid is a guy that you've been up and down on a little bit. I remember his first probably year, you didn't even know why he had a roster spot. And so I guess what's impressed you now that you've had this amount of time to watch him?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of mea culpas, I already talked about the Gobert trade. Naz Reid was another one I've been spectacularly wrong about. Which, by the way, I've just got to come right out and say this. I do not mind being wrong at all, because what that means is I've learned something about the game. And if I was right all the time, I'd be more insufferable than I am now. And I would not be learning nearly as much as I am when I'm wrong. And so what I was wrong about Naz Reid about was that it really did matter. Conditioning and interior attitude really did matter. He came into the league hopelessly out of shape and kind of had little player skills and a big player body, could not defend very well, fell down a lot, had flashes where he had really good games, but then had really bad games. And that's typical of a player who everybody gets excited about, but generally doesn't pan out. And I slotted him very prematurely in the won't pan out category. And then when the Gobert trade was made and Cat was going to slide over to the 4, and they signed Kyle Anderson, without naming names, I was told by people in the organization off the record that it was probable that Naz was either not going to make the team or would be traded by February. And he surprised them. He surprised me. I was going to say what I said about Naz even before I got this inside information. I was going to say I don't see a way for him to get minutes. Fast forward to your question, which is how has he been able to do it and why am I impressed now? He has concentrated on remaking himself physically. If you look at before and after with Naz Reid, I mean, they're reminiscent of all these New Year's Day before and after things for weight loss pills and stuff. But not only has he lost the weight, he's sculpted his body. He's lithe. He's wiry at the same time. It has unlocked his, he does have little man skills in that he's got a great handle. He's got a great crossover dribble. He's got a great spin move. But what keeps him on the court and why Chris Finch is excited about him is because his defensive awareness is much increased. His concentration on that side of the ball is much increased. He is guarding people out on the perimeter so that when they experiment with these 3 big lineups, when it's Cat and Rudy and Naz is effectively the small forward guarding the other team's wingmen, and doing a credible job at it, not a great job at it. It's kind of similar to the first question I got tonight about Rudy and 5 out. When the Wolves play big, they are going to suffer a lack of foot speed on great ball movement and 5-out playing. But the ability of Nas and Slow-Mo in that second unit with Cat as the center position to give a credible accounting of themselves on defense, to me, has been one of the most important parts of the Wolves being number one in defense. The most important part, quite frankly, is Rudy Gobert and setting the tone and being able to have everybody else trust in what they're doing and have him trust in what they're doing. But I would say that the plan was to have Cat, Nas, and Slow-Mo in that second unit on the front court, and we'll see if they can continue to sustain it. But them coming out of the gate doing that as a 3-person unit and being able to cover the floor and do very well on that was yet another sign. So this is like the third straight year that Nas has added something to his game in a significant manner. It can be physical, it can be mental, it can be a matter of quickness, it can be a matter of maturity, but he has put down a marker every year he's been with this team that has made him a better player than he was a year before. And I would have to say defense, especially defense in space this year, and the fact that, again, his shot selection and passing have ticked up a little bit better. He's always been great as a chaos player. And when they had the Iowa Wolves with J-Mac and Jalen Noel and Nas on the court with Ant and occasionally Taurean Prince, that was a really fun lineup in that fly-around year. But even though fly-around is his preferred motif, this is not a fly-around team necessarily, especially on offense. But Nas has fit into that more restrained way of playing and even managed to become electric in the context of that without totally getting outside the box. So, hats off to him.
We've
Nick.
got about, I just want to break in real quick. We've got about 10 minutes left, so maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then
then I'll wrap it up. Sounds good. Nick.
Hey, Britt. We're the worst at attacking switches in the league. Should we be worried?
We are what now?
Apparently, we're the worst at attacking switches.
Attacking switches. I see. Well, I mean, some of that has to do with the fact that it's an ISO heavy team to some extent. I would say that the template for this team has been that it's a great defense and a mediocre offense. And when everybody talks about meat on the bone, what they really mean in terms of what meat is left on the bone is offensive improvement. I think that Jade McDaniels, quite frankly, is very important to that, and his lack of minutes may make a difference there. I think that Ant's decision making, he needs to continue to make good decisions. Ant McDaniels, I mean, if you're not attacking switches, some of that has to do with the fact that your wings are not using their matchup advantage, or it could be that your bigs are out of position. In the case of the Wolves, I would say that Cat, his shot selection, I have no complaints there. I think that Rudy is being used just right. So it perhaps is a problem, but it's not a problem that I'm trying to think of how they would improve, and I guess my answer would be better decision making from Ant, but I think Ant is making great decisions already, and maybe better backup, second unit play, and then getting Jaden back. Sam.
Thanks so much, y'all. I just want to shout out the team here, both Britt and the rest of the MinnPost team, for doing these. Had a chance to be a part of about half of these since you've been doing them. So just want to give y'all props here. But my question is actually not specifically on the court related. This one's for the chat. This one's also for you, Britt. I've got a Secret Santa going on, and one of the people I've drawn is a Wolves fan, as am I. And so I'm thinking, just from your perspective or from anyone else's, what's something fun that you think could be a good Wolves gift or to receive? Anything off the top, just from, off the beaten path of just like t-shirt and all that. Obviously Jake's Graph's a great place to start, but he seems to be pretty t-shirt business. But any thoughts off the top from
Well, I
yourself
mean,
or
to
anyone
be
in the
honest
chat?
with you, it's not my bailiwick, but I would say nothing beats going to the game, I think. To be honest with you. But how old is this person?
I would say 30s, but I also maybe a more important is price point. We're talking like 10 to 40-ish. So like big tickets probably ain't gonna be it. But
yeah, no, I get it. You can find something in the nosebleed section, for 40, I think. And I just think going to the game matters. I would contact Jeff Municky, who's one of the nicest guys in Timberwolves history, an original guy. Anyway, that's my suggestion. I'm going to take one more quick one from Rick, I think it was. He had his hand up last. So we'll just go real quick. Is that your name, Rick? You got your face out there, huh?
Oh, sorry, it's Mark.
Oh, Mark, sorry.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about the tough schedule, the next 16 games. So how do you think it's going to go? And what do you say to fans like me who are having so much fun? We're starting to care a little bit too much about each game.
I say if you're not caring about this team right now, what's wrong with you?
Good point. Yeah.
You're 17-4. This is what you were dreaming about when they were, 13-31. You're trying to figure out how to get personnel. How do we draft so and so forth? How do we do this? How do we do that? They have the best record in the NBA. They've beaten the Celtics and the Nuggets, probably the presumptive NBA finalists right now. They are winning with defense, which is a solid way to win. They have a really happy locker room, a really good coach. Yes, they're having 16 games against plus, winning teams in a row. And but that isn't because they've had a bad schedule. They've had an easy schedule. They've had a tough schedule, one of the top 10 in the league in terms of toughness. So, at least until the last 4 games. The point being, they're going to lose some, obviously, in this 16-game stretch. Let's say they go 10-6. That means they'll be 27-10. So anyway, we got about 3 minutes left, and I just want to say what I almost always say because it's always relevant. I like to write when I like to write, what I like to write, and get paid sufficiently that I don't feel like I'm doing it for nothing, even though pay isn't the most important thing to me. And MinnPost fits all those boxes right now. And I also really like the idea of being in a environment where there's a lot of cool news surrounding me. I read the paper every day. Music, sports, and politics are all my jam. And so being in a place that gives all that as well as hoops is important to me. So I'm not going to ask you to give money right now. I'm just telling you that if you like what I do, one of the ways to express it is to give MinnPost money in some way, shape, or form. And I would suggest you do that if you can do that. If you can't, totally understand. And this, like I said, this isn't leaning on you for money. It's just basically saying, if you like my work and you can afford it, the way I'd want to see it go is to have this organization that I support, that supports me, get that money. And then the last thing is, there is this newsletter thing. It's still kind of in the early stages. We're going to roll out with the next column, but I think what I'll probably wind up doing is throwing in a paragraph or two that won't be in the stuff that gets published by MinnPost, and you may even get it a little early, I don't know. But at the very least, if you sign up for this newsletter, this AND1, the AND1 is kind of like this little extra insight. Maybe it'll be something like, that thing I just wrote about or told you about Ant and Slow-Mo having the best defense among pairs of players who played over 200 minutes together, 3 or 4 stats maybe, and an insight in a paragraph. So, and we'll do another one of these I don't think the Wolves are going away. And so I think it'll be a good idea to hit you guys up again sometime down the road.
Britt, we want to, as always, thank you for doing this, and to overestimate maybe MinnPost importance. In your last column, you mentioned slow-mo, and it was very evident that someone might have read it, because after the column, there was a totally different game plan for slow-mo. So again, not to overestimate MinnPost or our importance. So we appreciate what you do. By the way, I never introduced myself. My name's Harry Colbert. I'm the managing editor at MinnPost, and it's been my pleasure to help facilitate this chat. Again, the newsletter is And One. You can go to our page, minnpost.com. There's a tab that says newsletters. Click on that, put in your email, and we will make sure that you get the latest and greatest when it comes to Wolves. With that being said, it is game time. Go Wolves. I'm excited. Hopefully you are as well. Have a great evening, everyone.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Oh,
Brett.
and Gus wants to know about your music collection, so we'll get that one on the next next show.
Sounds good.